Hello, great souls. Welcome to our Living Yoga Satsang talk. We will be returning to Autobiography of a Yogi reflections on this beautiful sacred book. Let's begin together with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters of self-realization, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, and beloved Paramahansa Yoganandaji, saints of all religions, friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Guide us in our time together as we study this sacred text. Help us to awaken to our own divine essence. Help us to feel thy loving guidance and support in all that we do, and help us to share with all the gifts that we have received. Om, peace. Amen. Okay, it's so nice to be back and sharing once again on Autobiography of a Yogi. So we are on chapter 33. We left off on chapter 32. So let me go to, oops, there we are. Chapter 33, every chapter is beautiful. I feel like each time I say this, I am so deeply inspired. And this chapter is Babaji, the Yogi Christ of modern India. And one thing I would like to say at the start of our talk today is to acknowledge the date. So today we're filming on March 7th, and this is the anniversary of Yogananda's conscious exit from his body. And when a yogi dies consciously, a great realized yogi dies consciously, this is known as a Maha Samadhi. So they exit in full liberation and consciousness. And Yogananda did exit on March 7th. He was giving a talk at the Biltmore in Los Angeles. He was in the middle of a poem, My India, and he was actually entertaining the ambassador from India at this talk. Swami Kriyananda was there and was writing down, taking dictation of the talk that Yogananda was giving. In his book, The New Path, I can hold that up for you so you can see it. This is Swami's book, The New Path. This is my life with Paramhansa Yogananda. It's a really beautiful autobiography that Swami Kriyananda wrote of his spiritual life and finding Yogananda. And it's really a beautiful read, very inspiring, and a beautiful companion to Autobiography of a Yogi. So I was reading a little bit today about Swami talking about that event, and I've heard him speak on the event. There are tapes. There's a beautiful series called Treasures Along the Path that are talks that Swami Kriyananda gave. Incredible library. So if you go to Crystal Clarity, which is the publishing house for Ananda, you can find out more about Treasures Along the Path. Probably if you just typed in Treasures Along the Path, you might find it. But these are beautiful, digitally restored, archived talks that Swami gave, and there's just so many. And anyways, it's a beautiful treasure trove, a library. But Swami talked about, so Yogananda had said that one of his phrases that he used, which I think might be an English phrase, but he wanted to die with his boots on, meaning he intended to be serving and to leave his body in that way, and he did. They thought he had fainted, but he had a heart attack, and he died just as the poem ended. So just as he finished the poem, he then fell down, and some remarkable things about him is that his body, and this is true of saints, they never decompose. So it's a tradition that with a saint or with a master, they do not cremate that body, because the body continues to offer spiritual vibrations and very sacred and holy. And so there's a newspaper article in the LA, I don't know if it was LA Times, but again, you can probably research this, but famously it was written that because he was well known at that time, right? And so they wrote about him in the paper saying that his body had not decomposed. There's another beautiful story, the evening of when he left his body, where Dayamata, who was part of Self-Realization Fellowship, she was a nun with Yogananda, and Swami knew her when he lived there at Mount Washington. And so Dayamata, when in the evening, many of the monks and nuns, and there's a beautiful picture of this, and I'm not sure where, but I've seen it a number of times, where they were around the body, right, of Yogananda. They brought him home and they brought him to his bedroom, and many people were there reverently, just offering their love and appreciation for him. And later that night, when Dayamata was there with him, she was sitting with him, and I've talked many times in these talks about death because Yogananda does. And it's this experience for so many of us, especially if we believe the teachings that there is no death to consciousness. There is physical death. We do leave the physical body, although I'm going to talk a little bit about Babaji, who doesn't. So just as I'm saying that we leave, for most of us, most people leave the physical body. That's we are immortal in our soul, traveling through an incarnation in a mortal form. And when that form sheds, it can be often quite difficult, because, in fact, Yogananda, a beautiful story, when Sister Gyanamata passed, and she was Yogananda's foremost female disciple. When she left her body, Yogananda openly grieved at the loss of that, even though she had full liberation, and it was a joyous exit for her. She was going to be with God completely, and he had secured for her that final liberation as her guru, making sure that when she left, she would leave in full liberation. So part of him rejoiced for that. The other thing that is said is that we will meet again, right? So we will, in consciousness, there's various ways in which we will meet again in the astral realm. So it's not that he'd never see her again, but he was saying, he was grieving that never again would it be Yogananda and Sister in this particular form, right? That wouldn't happen again. And I always appreciate that he acknowledges the human experience of death, of the physical body. So when he left his body, right, my goodness, his students, his disciples, his devotees, very difficult. So Sister Dayamata was with him, just silently, but sad, right? Naturally, understandably, at his passing. Leaving the physical form was such a comfort to have that form. And as she was sitting there, she opened her eyes and noticed a tear was just coming out of his eye. And she felt it as a tear of, empathy, sympathy. I'm with you. I know it's hard to have me leave my physical body. And she took out a handkerchief and she caught that tear. Now, he had been out of his body for many, 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 many hours. So there's a certain miracle that just at that moment, a tear would appear and roll down his cheek. So today is the day of the anniversary of his conscious exit, and it's very powerful. Later tonight, if you happen to be watching this live, I can let you know, but you can also find this if you're watching it after the fact. You can go into the Ananda Palo Alto Sangha website and find the Mahasamadhi celebration. We'll have a meditation tonight. This will be in person and online. meditation from 5 to 7, and then 7:30. I don't know how long it will go. It could go till 8:30 or 9. Beautiful talks and music and readings and talks of Yogananda, talks of Swami Kriyananda. It'll be a very beautiful event. So we honor this conscious exit and also the power and the grace of the Guru and the Guru's presence in our life. There is a power, it is said in yoga teachings, that all of the gurus, whether they're our particular guru or not, they have a benevolence, a love that extends to everyone. So I remember when I went through my yoga teacher training, they were saying, and this gets repeated also in Raja Yoga, it's talked about, but this was the first time I'd been really deeply exposed to the yoga teachings. And they were saying, if you don't know who your guru is, if you're not sure, who to pray to, the gurus are very safe to pray to because they have no personal agenda. Their only agenda, their only desire, it's called a desireless desire, is to serve and to call forth the soul nature within each person and to awaken each one of us to our divine potential. It's also said that if you pray to a true guru, if they're not your guru, they'll guide you to your guru. So sometimes, just hearing that message, it may feel safe enough to pray to the divine. I know that when I heard that, it felt very true to me. I had, I've mentioned before, I had a relationship with Jesus before I came to the path of yoga. So everything I heard about Guru, I had experienced with Jesus, with Christ. It was very, I'd had a long journey already before yoga came into my life, spiritually discerning and finding my master. What was tremendously surprising to me was that my master would guide me to Yogananda and would say, and I never felt that Jesus was saying, I'm no longer your master. I didn't feel that. And there's a teaching in yoga that sometimes a master will take on the devotee of another guru because they can. They're there, they can help them. And I felt that very much. In the deepest part of me, mostly what I felt was the guidance to study with Yogananda as if he was my master. So what I want to say is that there's a certain level of subtlety in yoga teaching and yoga practice that's very difficult to find words for. I can say the words, but I can't really capture in words what the subtle, refined feeling was. I do know that a few years ago, I went to a training, and in that, it was a training for discipleship, a living discipleship training that is offered to people who are on this particular path and they've been disciples and they want to go deeper. And sometimes people take that training fairly early as disciples. Other times, in my case, I'd been a disciple for over 20 years, so a long time. It just depends when the timing is right for you. What I noticed for me, one of the beautiful aspects of it, is we reviewed, we got to sit with many senior teachers. It was truly an extraordinary experience and have lots of satsang and lots of talks. And we reviewed the meditation practices, the yoga, all the tools and practices. And I felt a great, profound, besides power, I certainly felt that, but a sweetness is really what I want to say, in that in one of the meditations, what I can say is that it just felt like a personal message is what I would say. And I'm feeling inspired to share it, so I will share it. The reason that I say it in this way is it is, I don't know how else to characterize it. Maybe that's why I'm saying it that way. So what I felt, it was very sweet, very touching. I had this image of a student, it was myself, 20 years previously, coming to an ashram and knocking on the door that was Yogananda's ashram. And I knocked on the door and he opened it and I said, my master has sent me to study with you. He said, I know, I've been waiting for you. And what I felt in that, which was very deeply touching in and of itself, and in that whole experience, I kept feeling this sense of Yogananda saying to Jesus, look how well I've done, him. And Swami said that about Yogananda. One time he was commenting on Swami's progress, and he said, look how well I've done. Look how well, and it's the truth. That is the teaching. It's the guru who does the work. So what I felt, and I got to see it myself, was my own depth and progression of the practices and how much I had, and I just got to see it. There's these certain moments where we can see, wow, this has really become a part of my life. I remember those early days. I remember when it was new. So there was a feeling of full circle in that, right? And I still feel, and I've always been so deeply grateful for the ministers and senior teachers at Ananda, especially when I was new to these teachings and this path, who honored my relationship with Christ. Christ is one of the gurus of this path, and they were able to hold this level of subtlety. And often I would have one of the teachers say to me, walk with Yogananda, walk with Jesus. Imagine yourself they're holding each one of your hands, and let them guide you. And I always felt them working together for me. So this is very in line with these teachings and this chapter of Babaji. So it's Babaji, the yogi Christ of modern India. And Yogananda here talks about Babaji, it's an extraordinary reality. And so one of the things that it says at the beginning of the chapter is the northern Himalayan crags near Badrinath are still blessed by the living presence of Babaji, guru of Lahiri Mahashaya. The secluded master has retained his physical form for centuries, perhaps for millenniums. The deathless Babaji is an avatara. The Sanskrit word means descent. The roots ava, down, and tree, to pass. In the Hindu scriptures, avatara signifies the descent of divinity into flesh. Babaji's spiritual state is beyond human comprehension. And this is something that Sri Yukteswar was saying to Yogananda, that we really can't, on a human level, comprehend this reality of Babaji. And in this particular chapter, when it talks about the reality of Babaji, it is difficult. It's full of miracles, and it's difficult to comprehend, which is, there's one of our Sunday service talks. The theme of the talk is, can man see God? And the answer that Swamiji gives as we're reading this, and in there's a quote from Jesus about God consciousness. So it's kind of like, well, the answer is no, man cannot, meaning our human consciousness cannot perceive the divine. But a spiritual consciousness, a soul-centered awareness, we can perceive it. So that actually is part of the journey of the spiritual journey, is being able to recognize for ourselves, when am I listening with ears that are tuned to a higher consciousness? Jesus very often famously said, to those who have ears, let them hear. To those who have eyes, let them see. He was speaking in a way that those who were ready to receive him could perceive him, and those who weren't didn't. And this is spoken of in this chapter, that the great masters will sometimes completely veil themselves, so they will make themselves invisible. There's stories of Jesus when he was in a crowded place and they were just about to capture him and suddenly he was gone. What happened? So the masters can do that. They can appear and disappear. They have that capacity. They can also be there. One person can see them, someone else can't. right? The famous story of Jesus in terms of sending out divine power, in which he teaches that it's about our receptivity. They're always sending out divine power. They're always present. They're always here. When Yogananda died, just before he died, because he gave some hints, he let people know, he was leaving. He let them know. And someone had asked him, will we be able to still be connected to you after you're gone? Will we feel you? Will we experience you? And he said, to those who think me near, I will be near. And really what he was saying is, to those who stay open and receptive to my consciousness and keep their own consciousness lifted, they will feel me. They will experience me. Right? I will be there. I am there. That's really the teaching. There's a story of, it was in India, I guess. There was a man who was talking about his guru who had left his body. And he was saying, well, I need a guru who's alive, right? He was talking to a sage or a saint, and the saint challenged him and said, your guru's not dead, you're dead, right? And meaning his consciousness. He challenged him to say, you're looking for something, you already have a guru. Your guru's not dead, his consciousness is fully present. On a human consciousness level, it's really difficult to comprehend that. Yesterday in Sunday service, we had some visiting ministers from Ananda Village. It was such a treat, so beautiful to have them. And Pranabha was giving the talk. He and his wife Parvati came. He was saying, the theme of the talk was about dogmatism. And he was teaching something that Swami Kriyananda taught around doubt, saying that there are two forms, primarily, there are two forms of doubt. One form of doubt is very contractive, and it restricts us and it keeps us from growing and experiencing teachings, right? And that's a doubt that is cynical, that just, arms crossed, shaking the head, I'm not listening. I have zero receptivity to whatever the teaching is. I mean, that could really happen in this chapter because it's extraordinary what you're hearing about and what you're reading of, is this possible? So Babaji is in his body still for millenniums? That alone at the very start is quite a lot to accept. So part of what we practice, so then here's the second aspect of doubt. So Swami said, the first doubt is negative, and it prevents us from learning and growing and receiving the teachings. The second form of doubt is uncertainty, and that's healthy, right? To simply say, I don't know, right? So the teachings, so many of the spiritual teachings, as we grow, as we develop, as we move forward, become more and more refined, more and more subtle. It really takes a spiritual advancement within ourselves to perceive the teaching. So we hear the teaching, and it takes some time to actually perceive it. It's been my experience with my own journey and the journey of students and friends. It happens. It happens in divine timing. We can't force it. But if we stay open and receptive and we practice the tools and we keep, one of which is good spiritual company and having teachers to support us and guide us, studying scripture, sacred text, all of these things help to prepare the soil. They help of our own consciousness to keep us receptive to what's being offered. So healthy doubt is, I don't know. I hear it, I'm taking it in, I'm considering it. We don't ask of ourselves to be somewhere we aren't. It won't really serve us. We simply stay in a place of honesty. Well, I will consider it, right? I'll consider it. I've heard many people talk about putting a concept on the shelf. They're not burying it. They're not refuting it. They're not saying, no way, I'll never be able to believe that. What they're saying is, I don't know about that. So I recognize it as a teaching, and I will, the way that I've always practiced it is have a respectful countenance, I guess, an attitude of respect for a teaching, to say, well, it is the teaching, right? Sometimes I'll share a teaching. All I can say is that it's the teaching, right? All I can say is that Babaji is known to be still in physical form. I have not, to my knowledge, seen him. So I can't claim something about this teaching beyond the teaching. I can say that I trust it, especially having practiced this for many years. I trust it. Also because of previous experience with Jesus, with Christ. I had experiences that helped me look to something else and say, I could see the possibility of that. Part of my work individually with students, and I feel very blessed for this, working spiritually with others. I've heard so many miraculous stories. I've never met someone. Is this true? I don't think I've ever met someone. I'm listening. I'll say that I spoke with someone recently. So let me finish my thought here. I was going to say I've never met someone who hasn't had an experience of divine presence. That being said, I spoke with someone recently who said to me they weren't sure they had. Now, I look at their life and it's very spiritually dedicated. So my hunch would be that something has happened for them to keep them so engaged in a spiritual life. I didn't have more time with them in that moment to explore it any further. They were reminding me, though, they were talking about, they were actually in a hard place that day. And sometimes that can affect it does affect our consciousness, but certainly it can affect our consciousness, and it was affecting her consciousness. So, that can be sometimes our answer, is that we feel distant from the experiences, those positive, uplifting experiences. And I'm mentioning it because I've seen how in my own life, pausing periodically to reflect on the miracles keeps me inspired and helps me to stay in the positive doubt, which says, I'm not sure sometimes. These are things I feel certain about, and more of those have happened for me. And these are things I don't know. I don't know. This chapter itself, it does uplift me. It does inspire me. I appreciate the teaching of it. So what it's saying, and I'll probably, I can see in terms of time, I'm going to return to this chapter. There's a whole lot here to share. So I'll go into more detail next week when we meet. But the teaching of the promise of what is possible, one of the things that it says in the chapter is that the masters reveal what they feel will be beneficial for others, to inspire them about who they are. They don't come to say how great they are. Their intention is not for us to say, oh, the master is so wonderful, and I could never be that. They're here to say, you are that. I'll end with a beautiful story of Yogananda's. One of his students came to him and said, oh, Master, when I'm with you, all I feel is Divine Mother, right? I feel Divine Mother's presence. I feel so inspired. So he was very sweetly saying this to Yogananda. Yogananda had a cane with him, and he tapped the student on the leg and said, behave accordingly, right? And it was just a way, really, of saying to the student, then rise up in your consciousness. And that's part of yoga teaching. It's not limited to yoga, but there's our part that we must do. There's a self-effort that's involved in the spiritual journey. So when he said, then behave accordingly, he was telling the student, don't just depend on my presence. Don't just come to me, oh, you're so wonderful, Master. When I'm with you, I feel Divine Mother, as if all I need to do is be with you. Well, most masters leave their body. So they want us to be able to learn how to commune inwardly with them. So that inner communion is always possible for us, whether they're in a physical body or they've left their body. So today, honoring Yogananda, the great blessing that his presence, his physical presence, his now living presence, is always blessing the earth and this world. And on a day of an anniversary like this, those blessings are even more present, more strong. So I just invite you, whatever your relationship with Yogananda, just, if you feel comfortable holding in your heart gratitude for the life that he came and gave and the way that he's still present. And just see if you sense that presence today. To those who think me near, I am near, is his promise. Okay, great souls. So good to be with you, and just wishing you many blessings today and in your life.